Der RAM reicht Rente ein. Rechner brennt, einfach explodiert. Wie realistisches Wasser Minecraft ruinieren würde, weil wir haben uns alle früher realistisches Wasser in Minecraft gewünscht. Ich weiß gar nicht, ob es heute noch ist, aber vor 30 Jahren, da begab es sich so, als Minecraft gerade noch frisch war. Da wollte man immer realistisches Wasser haben. Wahrscheinlich eine furchtbare Idee, aber irgendwie, naja, Shader haben es dann geil aussehen lassen und so. Nee, das Video ist 1 Jahr alt. Nein, das Video ist 1 Jahr alt. Ja, also, wir gehen mal ganz kurz rein. Warte mal.
What if Minecraft had realistic water? Well, here's 23 changes you'd see with Minecraft's new physics.
Einfach zur Ablenkung.
With realistic water, that means that the water source is always constantly updating. And one of the first things you'll notice with that is something called displacement, which is that if you place a block within a water stream, it'll just cause the water to go elsewhere. And important to note is that if the water can't spread outwards, it'll just go up instead, which looks cool, but it can make it a real pain to clean up water spills.
Ja, Moment, aber das würde doch hier im Sand versickern, oder? Und das Holz würde irgendwann morsch werden. Wollen wir nicht vergessen.
So if you don't have a bucket to pick up the water, you're not exactly going to be able to block it up like we used to. So you might want to spend 3 irons so that you can make this a little easier for yourself.
Da gibt es mittlerweile sehr coole Physics-Mods für Wasser. Habe ich drin. Okay, das klingt irgendwie gut.
If you were to fill up your bucket from a water pool, you notice that water doesn't just appear out of thin air. Rather, you'll be taking exactly 1 bucket's worth of water out of the pool, and the entire pool will shift down a level because of that, which gives us these interesting sights of half-filled puddles that we can stand in. And important to note that with this, if you're standing at a water source that's 1.5 blocks high, you'll still be able to breathe, because the truth is, your head's not staying outside of the water, which is pretty forgiving. But also with this,
das wäre ein geiler Pool.
You're gonna notice it's a lot more annoying to try and empty your water bucket into an already filled pool. Doing that will just cause the entire thing to flow over, and we'll be back to picking up the mess again. And since the water level decreases whenever we take out a bucket, that means that water sources also aren't infinite anymore. And now if you were to try to make this classic 2x2 design, you'll actually need 4 buckets to fill up the hole instead of 2. And draining it will only give you those 4 buckets of water, nothing else. But perhaps the biggest change of this all is that water is now a finite resource. So
wenn das richtig implementiert ist, wäre es super geil. Ja, weiß ich noch nicht.
So if you're living somewhere like a desert, use it very sparingly. Or if you're playing on Skyblock, at least build a cauldron so that you can fill up with raindrops.
Das wäre cool.
Slow, but it's all you got.
Aber irgendwie wäre es schon cool. Wenn man selber so Wasser sammeln müsste, wäre eigentlich auch irgendwie spannend.
To be that when you placed water, it would flow up to 8 blocks away. But now with realistic water, that's just not the case. And instead, the water will just
Regen könnte Pools füllen. Ja, ist irgendwie nice.
Spread into its immediate area, about a 1 to 2 block range. So if you were someone who likes to use water to clear out things like grass, flowers, and
oder Jahreszeiten, ja, und du hast Winter und alles ist gefroren, aber dann im Sommer schmilzt der Schnee auf den Bergen und da entstehen Flüsse, die so runterfließen und bei dir alles wegreißen, wo du gebaut hast. Vergiss das.
Redstone, I'm afraid this isn't gonna do the trick anymore. Which honestly I'm torn on. It's a lot less destructive, but when you need that destruction, it's a lot less helpful too. One of the biggest changes with water is that it doesn't flow the same way anymore. And you'll notice that if you stand in a water stream. Because in the past you might have been moved by the water as it had a current. Now that just isn't the case. It might push you slightly, but that'll be about it. And more importantly, it doesn't push items either, which makes a lot of redstone contraptions and item streams completely impossible to build. So I guess it'd be back.
Naja, doch, die Sachen könnten noch mitgerissen werden. Hä? Na klar. Oder? Vom Wasser mitgerissen werden ist jetzt nicht so unüblich bei echtem Wasser.
Back to hoppers for your item pipeline. Sorry. Waterfalls are a thing of the past, because now when the world generates, that 1 block water source is just gonna pour out into the open. And now when you walk close to what would have been a waterfall, all you'll see is a puddle, which is a lot less impressive. And while it's hard to say that's realistic, because waterfalls are obviously a thing in the real world, it is kind of funny to watch the water just flow out into the open, if not a little pathetic. Despite all the changes to water's physics, we're still able to use a water bucket for a clutch. And now if you just place down the bucket to break your fall, the water isn't gonna spread everywhere like you usually would, which overall is less destructive, and it still looks pretty cool. So I'd still recommend carrying one of these in your hotbar for safekeeping. With realistic water, automatic farms are almost a thing of the past, and now they'll be extremely difficult to build, because since the water doesn't flow and push all the crops to the bottom, everything will just stay inside of the farm. And even if you're able to run this system once successfully, it's definitely a pain to try to get the water back into the system, or to even clean it out. So I'd recommend switching to a micro farm design like this, so that a piston breaks your crops instead of having your water do it. In the past, we used to be able to use pressure plates to stop a water flow, but now with the new water physics, that just isn't so. And instead, the water will displace and eventually break the pressure plate as it is, which could make certain mob grinder designs pretty annoying to build. And now you'll need to find another way to get your water to stop. But in fairness, it never made that much sense that pressure plates would stop water anyway, so I guess this is logical, if not a little bit frustrating. With realistic water physics, we can completely transform this river, since all it takes is for us to dig an alternative route for the river to flow, and it'll go there. But that'll also cause the rest of the water level to slightly lower.
Das wäre aber eigentlich ziemlich cool. Manchmal. Und wenn man Flüsse bauen will, muss man dann wirklich irgendwo an einen Ozean anschließen. Wär eigentlich nice.
Which is a weird sight, but it means that if you're dedicated enough, you could use this technique to actually drain the original branch of the river. And then you'll just be left with a dry riverbed. Which, who knows, could be handy to stop drowned mobs from spawning next to your base. You'll just have to pick the right location to flow the rest of the water into, since it doesn't easily disappear. If you place down iron bars, the water's just gonna flow through them. Which at first might seem like a nuisance, but it can actually allow for some pretty cool builds. Like, picture this. You build yourself a realistic sewer where the water actually flows through the grate.
Voll
A way
geil.
of draining out excess spills that happen to get inside your animal pen. However it happened is none of my business, but at least it'll be easy to fix. This hourglass is completely possible with realistic water physics, because now water will try to drain down from a higher place into a lower one. So once we break this block, the water will seamlessly flow from the top down to the bottom. And this is just one of the many cool builds that you can make, since this could also allow for a water mill as well. And give this to the technical community, and I'm sure they'll find out more than a few farms that could use this, making it one of the more helpful uses of realistic water. Be careful not to dig from a river down into a cave, since with the way that water works now, that'll eventually cause the cave to fill up with water. And worse still, that could also end up draining your river, which would give you more than a few problems, both above ground and below it. And while this could technically happen with the ocean too, unless the cave's very big, you're really not gonna see much.
Das wäre cool. Eine von den 9 Höhlen, ne, aus dem Ozean und dann eine aus dem, also von den, ne, und dann vom Ozean runter in eine der 9 Höhlen und dann gucken, wie es absinkt. Wäre irgendwie cool.
But all of that to say, be careful, because I don't think placing a few doors to get an air bubble is going to help you this time. Cobblestone generators no longer
Der RAM reicht Rente ein. Rechner brennt einfach, explodiert.
work. Because while it's still true that when water and lava meet, you get a cobblestone block, the sad truth is that every time this happens, the level of the liquid lowers each time, which means that unfortunately, a generator can only make about 4 pieces of cobble before you need to refill it. And for those of you on Skyblock, that would make this challenge basically impossible, since we'd no longer have a constant way to get cobblestone. But I guess it's not all that surprising, right? Infinite cobblestone definitely isn't realistic, so it makes sense it doesn't work anymore. Water isn't the only one that got realistic physics, since now, nether lava will also see the same thing. And the first thing you'll notice when you
Oh, Gott sei Dank. Ja, Gott sei Dank. Ja, die scheiß Lava im Nether. Oh, das wäre schön.
go through the nether portal is that lava no longer permanently falls from the ceiling, but instead it'll spawn up there, then flow down and either join the lava pools or just become a sad little puddle to avoid while you're walking around the nether.
Ja, geil.
Which say what you will, this makes it a lot safer to use on the Elytra in the nether. And I'll gladly take not having to bob and weave just so I can make it over to the fortress. Because of the way that water displaces, if you place a block within water, it'll push you away slightly. And then the opposite of that is that if you destroy a block, it'll pull you closer to the source, which almost gives us a pulley system of sorts. And in certain ways, this could be extremely helpful for redstone. Digging underwater is still a pain, and unfortunately, we can't just craft a door to get away from that. Since now, much like Bedrock Edition, the water will just fill up the blocks that the door is on. And there you go, our door is now waterlogged, we don't have an air bubble. Which
eigentlich auch viel realistischer,
only means we don't have a safe place to breathe, but it also means that digging underwater is going to be just as slow as it was. And I'm afraid that's going to make an ocean monument that much harder to complete. Sorry. This is an AFK pool, or rather something that's going to keep you moving so that you don't get kicked for inactivity. But the sad truth is that with realistic water, there's just no way of making these. And since the water doesn't push you the way it used to, if you built one of these structures the same way, you just sit there. And now if you don't want to get kicked, you're going to have to do something to keep yourself busy. Personally, I'd recommend fishing, since that still works the same. And hey, you'll even get some results from it instead of just hanging out in a lazy river. If you build a mob grinder, it's much harder to get the mobs into the right place, since now we can't just rely on water to get them into the right spot. So we'll have to get creative in how we build one of these. Whether that's using turtle eggs so that the zombies try to go kill themselves, or suspending an iron golem so that our mobs try to run close to it and then they also fall in that way. But both are a lot more expensive and a lot more situational, because unfortunately this blanket solution just isn't going to work as well as it used to. Pistons no longer break water, but rather they're able to push it. And you can see as much from this simple example. You pull the lever and the water displaces out of the hole, which, simple as that seems, can make huge differences for the way that we do redstone. And now we're able to move water in and out of a specific area and even push our items in that direction. Meaning item streams might still be possible, you're just gonna need a few.
Das ist ja alles sehr cool und irgendwie nette Überlegungen, aber ich will eigentlich sehen, wie der Ozean abfließt. Das alles hier, ja, nice, ist nice to have und ja, cool, irgendwie schön. Aber ich will sehen, wie der Ozean abfließt, Mann. Ich bin hier für weltbewegende Ereignisse und nicht für ein Pfützchen.
Pistons to do it. Important to notice that water elevators still work with realistic water physics. It's just they're a lot less practical, since even though a magma block can still pull you down and soul sand will push you up, since there isn't an easy way to stop the water, like using doors or fence gates, that could just mean that the water flows out at the entrance and exit points. So even though this works in theory, in execution, it's a lot tougher to pull off. And you might just want to stick to another elevator to simplify your problems. 1.19 added in waterlogged leaves, and thanks to realistic water, they're basically removed. Since now if you were to pour water next to your leaves, it'll just flow through the cracks until it reaches the bottom of the tree. And while it is satisfying to watch it all flow through, it means that you can no longer use waterlogged leaves as an exchange for obsidian in your blast chamber. And to me, that might just be the biggest loss yet. But if you're a builder, you could use this as a cool way to build yourself something like a fountain. So it's a loss for function, but it might be a win for form. Water and slabs now behave very differently. Since now, if you place a slab on the top half of a block, the water will just flow underneath it, and place it on the bottom half of a block, and the water will flow over top. And since the water's always looking for a crack to slip through, since the slab is only half the height of a regular block, it's just the perfect opportunity for things to go wrong. Which does look satisfying, but it's a big loss for waterlogged blocks. So unless you have it set up properly so the water can't flow out, we might still have a problem here. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video. So see if they're right and have a good one, alright?
Weißt du, wie es euch geht? Schon cool, aber ja, das war jetzt nicht, da war einfach, war aber vielleicht zum Ablenken ein bisschen. Vielleicht ein bisschen zum Ablenken, das Gehirn wieder ein bisschen auf Leerlauf schalten, dafür war es gut. Das war langweilig, hat mich immer müde gemacht, siehste, und genau das war ja auch der Ziel mit diesem Video.